In the vast silence of space where stars burn like ancient promises and darkness stretches beyond comprehension, there exists a truth that most civilizations choose to ignore. When the weak call for help, the strong rarely answer. But humanity, that strange species from a blue marble planet called Earth, had never learned to look away from suffering. This is the story of how that singular quality would reshape the destiny of an entire galaxy, the bridge of the Earth. Defense Ship Sentinel hummed with quiet efficiency as Captain Jenna Cross reviewed navigation charts for their routine patrol sector. At 38 years old, she had spent half her life among the stars, and her weathered features told stories of countless difficult decisions. Her dark hair, streaked with premature silver, was pulled back in a practical bun. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that came not from arrogance, but from knowing she could trust her crew with her life. Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka sat at the communications station, his fingers dancing across holographic displays as he monitored the usual chatter of deep space. Commercial vessels reporting cargo manifests, scientific outposts sharing data, military frequencies maintaining their encrypted silence. Everything was normal until it wasn't. A faint signal broke through the background noise, weak and fragmented. Speaking a language the universal translator struggled to process. Tanaka straightened in his chair, his youthful face creasing with concentration. At 26, he was the youngest senior officer on the bridge, but his skills had earned him the position through merit rather than connections. His family back in Tokyo had wanted him to become a doctor, but the call of the cosmos had proven stronger than tradition. "Captain, I'm picking up something unusual," Tanaka reported, adjusting his headset. "It's a distress call, but the origin language isn't in any of our databases. The signal is extremely old, maybe broadcasting for decades." Jenna moved to his station, studying the wavelength patterns on his screen. The signal pulsed with desperate regularity, a heartbeat of hope that refused to die. Location? "Edge of the Kepler expanse near the quarantine zone," Tanaka replied, his voice uncertain. "That sector has been marked as off-limits by the Galactic Council for the past 30 years. The mention of the Galactic Council made Jenna's jaw tighten. Humanity's relationship with the sprawling confederation of alien species that governed most of known space remained complicated at best. Earth had been granted junior membership status only 15 years ago, more out of necessity than acceptance. The older races viewed humans as impulsive, emotional, and dangerously unpredictable. Perhaps they were right. Why would a distress signal originate from a quarantine zone? Jenna asked aloud, though she expected no immediate answer. Tanaka pulled up additional data, his fingers moving with practiced speed. According to records, the Council declared that sector uninhabitable after a failed colonization attempt by the Krathon Empire. The planet was deemed strategically worthless and environmentally unstable. No resources worth extracting, no trade routes nearby. "And yet someone is down there calling for help," Jenna murmured. She turned to her executive officer, a stocky man named Robert Kim who had served in the merchant fleet before joining the military. "Bob, what's the Council's stance on responding to distress calls in quarantine zones?" Kim consulted his tablet, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Official policy is non-intervention. The zones exist for a reason, they claim. Responding could expose our ships to unknown hazards." "What about moral obligation?" Jenna pressed. "Not mentioned in the regulations, Captain," Kim replied with a slight smile. He had served with Jenna long enough to know where this conversation was heading. For 3 hours, the Sentinel's crew worked to clean up the signal and extract more information. What they discovered painted a grim picture. The distress call came from a species called the Kalari, a pre-industrial civilization that had been forcibly relocated to the quarantined planet by the Krathon Empire during their expansionist phase 3 generations ago. The Krathons had used the Kalari as a test population for terraforming technology, then abandoned them when the experiment failed. The Kalari had been calling for help ever since. Their automated beacon, built from scavenged technology, had broadcast continuously for 27 years. In all that time, thousands of ships had passed within range. None had stopped. Dr. Yuki Nakamura, the ship's xenobiologist, reviewed biological data extracted from the signal with growing horror. "Captain, according to these readings, the Kalari population has declined by 60% since they were abandoned. Their world is dying and they're dying with it." Jenna stood at the observation window, staring at the distant stars. Behind her, she could feel her crew waiting for a decision. Protocol was clear. Quarantine zones were forbidden without council authorization. Requesting permission could take weeks, maybe months, and would likely be denied. By then, how many more Kalari would die? Set a course for the Kepler expanse, Jenna ordered quietly. Maximum sustainable speed. The bridge fell silent for a moment before activity resumed with renewed purpose. Kim approached her side, his voice low. The council will have our heads for this. Let them try, Jenna replied. I didn't join the fleet to watch people die while we wait for bureaucrats to debate the value of their lives. As the Sentinel's engines powered up and the stars began to streak past, Lieutenant Tanaka continued monitoring the distress signal. He enhanced the message, filtering out decades of interference and corruption. When the translation finally came through clearly, his eyes widened. Captain, you need to hear this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The message played across the bridge speakers, translated into human English, but retaining the desperate melody of the original language. This is Koran of the Kalari people. We were brought to this world against our will and abandoned to die. For generations we have called to the stars hoping someone would hear. We do not ask for rescue. We are too many and our world is too far. We ask only that someone remember us, that someone knows we lived, that we tried to survive. Please, if you can hear this, tell the galaxy that the Kalari existed. Tell them we did not deserve to be forgotten. The message repeated as it had for 27 years. A plea not for salvation but simply for acknowledgement, for someone to care enough to remember. Jenna felt something harden in her chest, a determination born from anger and sorrow in equal measure. Tanaka, broadcast a response on all frequencies. What should I say, Captain? Jenna turned from the window, her eyes blazing with purpose. Tell them that someone heard them. Tell them that humanity is coming. And tell them that they are not forgotten. As the message transmitted across the void, racing ahead of the ship at light speed, the crew of the Sentinel prepared for whatever they would find. They had no way of knowing that their decision to answer a call everyone else ignored would trigger a chain of events that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. In the cold calculus of interstellar politics, the Kalari were worthless, but to humanity, still young enough to remember what it meant to be vulnerable and afraid, every life had value. That difference in perspective would soon become the most powerful weapon in their arsenal. The Sentinel emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler expanse, and what greeted them defied every expectation. The quarantined planet hung in space like a bruised jewel, its atmosphere choked with dust storms that obscured most of the surface. But it was the orbital debris field that caught everyone's attention. Hundreds of derelict ships, some centuries old, drifted in silent testimony to the Krathon Empire's abandoned ambitions. Commander Sophia Reyes stood in the shuttle bay, inspecting her ground team with a critical eye. At 42, she had led more humanitarian missions than combat operations, though her service record showed proficiency in both. Her olive skin bore the scars of a life spent on frontier worlds, and her commanding presence made even the tallest Marines stand straighter. Listen up, Sophia addressed her team of 20 specialists. We don't know what we're walking into down there. The Kalari have been isolated for 3 decades with failing resources. They might see us as saviors, or they might see us as another species coming to exploit them. We approach with weapons holstered and medical supplies visible. Questions? A young Marine raised her hand. Commander, what if the Krathons return? Intel suggests they still claim this sector. Then we deal with it, Sophia replied firmly. Our mission is to help the Kalari, not to start a war. But we won't abandon them if things get complicated either. Dr. Yuki Nakamura joined the ground team, her medical kit strapped securely to her back. At 35, she had treated more alien species than most xenobiologists ever encountered. Her Japanese heritage showed in her precise movements and meticulous preparation, but her warm smile put even the most nervous patients at ease. I've analyzed their biology from the signal data, Yuki briefed the team. The Kalari are carbon-based humanoids with 6-fingered hands and enhanced lung capacity for their high-gravity world. Their immune systems are robust, but they're susceptible to respiratory infections from the dust storms. We'll need to establish medical tents immediately. The shuttles descended through the turbulent atmosphere, buffeted by winds that would have torn apart anything less sturdy than military-grade craft. When they finally broke through the cloud layer, the devastation below became clear. What had once been a terraformed paradise had degraded into a barely habitable wasteland. Rivers had dried to trickles, forests had withered to scattered groves, and the land bore the scars of desperate agriculture, pushed beyond sustainable limits. The Kalari settlement appeared on the horizon, a sprawling collection of structures built from salvaged ship parts and local stone. Smoke rose from crude furnaces, and terraced fields clung to hillsides where the soil still held moisture. As the shuttles approached, figures emerged from buildings, shading their eyes against the sun as they watched the unknown vessels descend. Sophia's shuttle touched down first in a cleared area outside the main settlement. The loading ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, and she stepped out into the harsh sunlight, her hands deliberately empty and visible. Behind her, the medical team began unloading supplies while armed Marines maintained a defensive perimeter, without pointing weapons at anyone. The Kalari who approached were taller than humans, averaging 7 feet in height with slender builds that spoke of generations adapting to insufficient nutrition. Their skin ranged from deep purple to pale lavender, and their faces featured large, expressive eyes that dominated their features. They wore simple clothing woven from plant fibers, and many showed signs of illness or injury left untreated. An elderly Kalari stepped forward, leaning heavily on a walking stick carved from dark wood. His skin had faded to an almost gray tone, and his movement spoke of pain endured with dignity. When he spoke, the universal translator rendered his melodic language into accented English. "I am Korin, elder of the Kalari remnant," he said, his voice carrying across the landing zone. "For 27 years I have maintained the beacon my father built, never believing anyone would truly answer." "You are human?" Sophia removed her helmet, meeting his gaze directly. "I am Commander Sophia Reyes of the Earth Defense Ship Sentinel. We received your distress call, Elder Korin. We've come to help." Korin's large eyes glistened with moisture. "The galaxy has made its position clear. We are forgotten people on a forgotten world. Why would you risk Council displeasure to help us?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Sophia replied simply. "Where we come from, you don't leave people to suffer when you have the power to help them. It's not complicated." A younger Kalari pushed through the crowd, his movements quick despite obvious malnutrition. His skin bore the deeper purple of youth, though it was marked with scars from hard labor. Elder Korin, they could be like the Krathons. More promises, more experiments, more betrayal. Korin raised a hand to quiet the young one. "Peace, Thren, look at what they bring. Medical supplies, food synthesizers, water purification units. These are not the tools of exploitation." Dr. Nakamura approached with her medical scanner, moving slowly to avoid startling anyone. "Elder Korin, with your permission, I'd like to examine your people. We've brought medicine and equipment that can treat many conditions." Korin studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You may help us, Doctor. Though I warn you, our needs are vast. We have 243 souls remaining from the original 1,000 who were brought here. Many are children who have never known health." Over the next hours, the human medical team worked tirelessly. Yuki discovered that chronic respiratory infections plagued nearly every Kalari, caused by the constant dust storms and lack of proper shelter. Malnutrition had weakened their immune systems, creating a cascade of health problems. But they were also remarkably resilient. Given proper treatment and nutrition, their bodies responded with surprising speed. Young Thren watched the humans work with suspicious fascination. He approached Sophia as she helped construct a permanent medical shelter, using quick assembly panels from the Sentinel. "Why do you do this?" he asked bluntly. "What do you gain?" Sophia paused in her work, considering the question seriously. "My grandmother used to tell me a story from Earth's history. During a great war, enemy soldiers found themselves trapped in trenches on opposite sides. On a winter holiday, they stopped fighting and shared food, sang songs together, even played games. When morning came, they returned to their positions. The generals were furious, called it a betrayal of duty. What happened to them? Thren asked. They were punished, some severely. But years later, when people remembered that war, they didn't remember the battles or the strategies. They remembered that moment when enemies chose to be human first. That's what we gain, Thren. We get to be the people we want to be, not the people circumstances try to force us to become. Thren's expression remained skeptical, but something in his eyes had softened. The Krathons brought our ancestors here with promises of a better life. They said they would terraform this world into paradise. Instead, they used us to test their technology. When it failed, they left us with broken equipment and dying land. How do I know you won't do the same? You don't, Sophia admitted honestly. Trust has to be earned. All I can offer is time and action. Judge us by what we do, not what we say. As night fell, the human team had established a functioning medical camp, repaired the settlement's water recycling system, and distributed enough rations to ensure no one would go hungry. The Kalari, initially hesitant, began to relax around their unexpected helpers, children. Their resilience unbroken despite harsh lives, played near the human shuttles with fascinated wonder. Captain Cross contacted Sophia via encrypted communication. "Commander, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up energy signatures consistent with Krathon warships. 3 vessels heading this way. ETA 48 hours. Sophia's stomach tightened. "They're coming to investigate why someone entered their quarantine zone. Or they heard we're here and want to reassert their claim," Jenna replied grimly. "Either way, we need to be ready. I'm requesting emergency reinforcements from Earth Fleet, but they're 6 days out at best." "We're not leaving these people," Sophia stated flatly. "I never suggested we would," Jenna responded. "But we need to prepare for conflict. The Krathons don't take kindly to interference in territories they claim, even territories they've abandoned." Sophia gathered her senior staff in the medical tent after the Kalari had retired for the night. The situation was clear and dire. 3 Krathon warships against 1 human patrol vessel. The odds were not favorable. "We could evacuate as many Kalari as possible," suggested Lieutenant Chen, the shuttle pilot. "Cram them into every available space and run. Leaving the rest to Krathon mercy?" Yuki shook her head. "We've examined their records. The Krathons don't show mercy. They'll either eliminate the remaining Kalari or relocate them to another experimental site." "Then we fight," Sophia said quietly. "We make them pay for every inch and we buy time for reinforcements to arrive." "Commander," one of the Marines spoke up. A veteran named Jackson who had served in the border wars. "With respect, we're a humanitarian mission. We have enough firepower to handle pirates, not a Krathon battle group." Sophia met his eyes steadily. "I know what we signed up for, Jackson. I also know what we found when we got here. People who have been abandoned by everyone, who spent 3 decades screaming into the void hoping someone cared enough to listen. We heard them, we came, and now we're going to show the galaxy that humanity doesn't make empty promises." The next morning, Sophia approached Elder Corin as he watched the sunrise from a hill overlooking the settlement. The old Kalari turned as she approached, his expression peaceful despite everything. "You have word that the Krathons come," he stated rather than asked. "I can see it in how your people prepare." "How did you know?" Sophia asked, surprised. "I have lived a long life, Commander. I recognize the movements of those preparing for battle." Corin sighed deeply. "You should leave. Take what supplies you can carry and go. The Krathons will destroy you for interfering." "We're not leaving," Sophia replied firmly. "Then you are fools," Corin said, but his voice held admiration rather than criticism. "Noble fools, perhaps, but fools nonetheless. You would die for people you just met?" Sophia looked out over the settlement, where human medics worked alongside Kalari families, where Marines helped repair homes, where 2 species who had been strangers yesterday now shared meals and stories. "Elder Corin, I'm going to tell you something about humans. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest or the most advanced. But we have one quality that seems to be rare among the stars. When we say we'll stand with you, we mean it, even if it costs us everything." Corin's eyes filled with tears that traced down his weathered face. "Then perhaps," he said softly, "perhaps there is still hope in this universe after all." The Krathon warships emerged from hyperspace like predators scenting blood, their hulls gleaming with a dark metallic sheen that had terrorized a dozen systems during their empire's expansion. 3 massive vessels, each dwarfing the Sentinel by a factor of 5, arranged themselves in a standard intimidation formation above the planet. Their weapon systems powered up with barely concealed threat, energy signatures blazing across every scanner on the human ship. Admiral James O'Brien watched from the Sentinel's bridge as the lead Krathon vessel opened a communication channel. At 56, O'Brien had seen enough conflicts to know when diplomacy would work and when it was merely a prelude to violence. His gray beard and calm demeanor hid a tactical mind that had earned him respect across Earth Fleet, and his steady hands had guided ships through situations where younger captains might have panicked. The Krathon commander appeared on screen, his reptilian features twisted in what might have been contempt. The species stood upright like humans, but their scaled skin rippled with colors that indicated mood and status. This one's scales showed the deep crimson of authority and the black striations of barely controlled rage. I am war leader Thornak of the Krathon Imperial Fleet. You occupy a world under Krathon jurisdiction. Your presence here violates council regulations and intrudes upon our sovereign territory. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. O'Brien kept his expression neutral, though his crew could read the steel in his eyes. This is Admiral James O'Brien of the Earth Defense Ship Sentinel. We responded to a distress call from the inhabitants of this world. Under galactic law, humanitarian response supersedes territorial claims. Thornak's laugh was a harsh barking sound. Humanitarian response? For the test subjects? They are Krathon property, abandoned because they proved useless. Your species is new to the stars, human. You do not yet understand how things work. The weak serve the strong or they die. This is the natural order. That's not our way, O'Brien replied quietly. We don't measure a civilization's worth by its weapons or its willingness to exploit others. We measure it by how it treats those who cannot defend themselves. Then you are fools who will not survive long among the stars. Thornak sneered. You have 1 hour to evacuate your personnel. After that, we will remove you by force and reclaim our property. The channel closed abruptly. O'Brien turned to his bridge crew, seeing the mix of fear and determination on their faces. They were mostly young officers, the kind who had joined Earthfleet because they believed in something larger than themselves. Now they would be tested in ways they had never imagined. Status report, O'Brien commanded, his voice steady. Lieutenant Priya Sharma, the weapons officer, pulled up tactical displays with practiced efficiency. At 29, she had graduated top of her class at the academy, her brilliant mind able to calculate firing solutions faster than the ship's computer. Her family had emigrated from Mumbai to the Mars colonies when she was young, and she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had proven herself repeatedly. Sir, we're outgunned and outmassed. Their shields are military grade, ours are designed for patrol duty. Their weapons can punch through our hull in maybe 3 direct hits. We might last 10 minutes in direct combat. Then we don't fight directly, O'Brien said, studying the tactical display. Priya, what are our advantages? Sharma's eyes lit up as she analyzed the data. We're faster and more maneuverable. The Sentinel was built for speed and evasion, not slugging matches. We can dance around them, make them chase us. Good. And the planet itself? Sir, the debris field, came the excited voice of Ensign Robert Torres from the navigation station. Hundreds of derelict ships in orbit. We could use them as cover, force the Krathons to risk hitting their own old equipment. O'Brien allowed himself a small smile. Exactly, we're not trying to win a fight. We're trying to buy time until reinforcements arrive. Every minute we keep them occupied is another minute Commander Reyes has to prepare the evacuation sites, and another minute closer to Earth Fleet's arrival. On the ground, Sophia had gathered both her human team and the Kalari leadership. Young Thren stood beside Elder Corrin, his earlier suspicion replaced by fierce determination. The medical tents had been collapsed and converted into fortified shelters. Every human who could hold a weapon had been armed, and even some of the healthier Kalari had volunteered to fight. We have maybe 3 hours before those ships start bombarding from orbit, Sophia explained, pointing to a hastily drawn map of the settlement. We've identified caves in the northern hills with enough mineral density to block their sensors and absorb weapons fire. We'll evacuate everyone there. And then what? Thren asked. We hide in caves while your ship is destroyed and the Krathons hunt us down anyway. Sophia met his challenging gaze without flinching. Then we make them work for every meter. We make them pay a price that their commanders have to explain to their empire. We show them that the Kalari are not helpless victims anymore. Dr. Nakamura stepped forward, her gentle voice cutting through the tension. Thren, I've been studying your people's history from the records Elder Corrin shared. Your ancestors were engineers and builders before the Krathons took them. You have skills and knowledge that have been suppressed by just trying to survive. What if we gave you tools and weapons? Could you fight for your own freedom? Thren's expression transformed, pride replacing doubt. We have been waiting for someone to give us a chance. Yes, Doctor. We can fight. The next hour was a blur of activity. Human Marines trained Kalari volunteers in basic combat tactics. Engineering teams repaired and armed old Krathon equipment salvaged from the debris field. Children and elderly were moved to the cave network with supplies to last weeks. The settlement itself was rigged with traps and sensors, turning it into a defensive maze rather than an easy target. Eldrick Corrin approached Sophia as she oversaw the final preparations. The old Kalari moved with surprising energy, as if decades had lifted from his shoulders. "Commander, for 30 years we have merely existed, waiting to die. Today you have given us something precious. You have given us purpose again." "You always had purpose," Sophia replied. "You survived. You maintained hope. You kept your people together when everything tried to tear you apart. We're just helping you remember your own strength." In orbit, the hour deadline expired. Thornak's patience, never substantial, evaporated entirely. All ships target the human vessel. Destroy it. Then we cleanse the surface of this infestation. The Krathon warships opened fire, massive energy beams lancing through space where the Sentinel had been moments before. But O'Brien had already ordered evasive maneuvers, sending his ship diving toward the debris field with acceleration that pressed everyone against their seats. "Priya, return fire. Make them think we're more dangerous than we are," O'Brien commanded. The Sentinel's weapons, designed for anti-pirate operations, were like mosquito bites against the Krathon shields. But they served their purpose, drawing attention and anger. Thornak ordered his ships to pursue, and they plunged into the debris field after the nimble human vessel. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse among the wreckage of failed dreams. The Sentinel wove between derelict hulks, using them as shields and obstacles. The Krathon ships, massive and powerful, struggled to track their smaller opponent. When they fired, they often hit old wrecks instead, sending debris cascading through space in spectacular explosions. "Sir, lead ship is breaking off to bombard the surface," Torres reported urgently. "Priya, everything we have into that ship's engines," O'Brien ordered. "Make them care about us more than the ground targets." The Sentinel wheeled around with impossible grace, unleashing every weapon at once in a concentrated barrage. The attack barely scratched the Krathon shields, but it accomplished its goal. Thornak, enraged by the impudence of this tiny ship, recalled his vessel and focused all 3 warships on destroying the Sentinel. On the planet's surface, Sophia watched the light show in orbit through her binoculars. Each explosion, each energy beam, represented her friends and colleagues fighting against impossible odds. She felt helpless, watching others die while she stood on solid ground. "Commander," one of her Marines called out. "Multiple dropships separating from the Krathon vessels. They're coming down." "So they want to do this the hard way," Sophia muttered. She activated her communication device, broadcasting to all defensive positions. "All units, incoming hostiles. Remember your training. Make every shot count. Show them what humans and Kalari fighting together can do." The Krathon dropships descended like falling stars, heavily armored and bristling with weapons. They expected to find frightened refugees huddled in primitive shelters. Instead, they flew into a carefully prepared trap. Hidden weapons emplacements, salvaged and repaired from Krathon's own abandoned equipment, opened fire from concealed positions. The first wave of dropships exploded spectacularly, raining debris across the landing zones. Thren stood beside a human Marine named Jackson, both of them manning a heavy plasma cannon. When Jackson had been injured by shrapnel, Thren had pulled him to cover and taken over the weapon without hesitation. Now the young Kalari fired with deadly precision, his enhanced eyesight picking out targets that humans struggled to see. "Not bad for someone who was hiding in caves yesterday," Jackson said, pressing a medical patch to his bleeding arm. "Not bad for someone who just learned which end of the gun to point at the enemy." Thren shot back with a grin that showed too many teeth to be entirely human. The battle raged through the settlement, Krathon ground forces advancing with brutal efficiency only to be caught in crossfires and ambushes. Human Marines and Kalari fighters moved in coordinated teams, combining human tactical training with Kalari knowledge of the terrain. Every building became a fortress, every street a killing zone. In orbit, the Sentinel finally took a direct hit. The shields collapsed under sustained fire, and energy beams carved through the hull. Alarms blared across the bridge as systems failed. O'Brien gripped his command chair, feeling his ship dying around him. "Sir, we've lost engines. Life support is failing. Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7, Priya reported, her voice tight with pain from a broken arm. O'Brien looked at his young crew, seeing fear but no surrender in their eyes. They had bought 3 hours. Reinforcements were still 3 hours away. It wasn't enough. Then Torres gasped, staring at his sensors. "Sir, new contacts emerging from hyperspace. Multiple ships. Signature patterns are human. But not just Earth fleet. Those are colony defense forces from Mars, Europa, Titan, and Proxima Centauri. The communication channels erupted with voices, dozens of human captains all speaking at once. They had heard Earth fleet's emergency call. They had dropped everything and come running. The scattered colonies of humanity, often arguing among themselves about politics and resources, had united when one of their own called for help. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Mars defense ship Valiant. We heard you needed some backup, Admiral." "Captain Singh of the Europa patrol ship Guardian. Sorry we're late to the party." "Captain O'Neill of Titan security vessel Defiant. Nobody messes with Earth fleet while we're around." Tears streamed down O'Brien's face as he watched 23 human ships drop out of hyperspace, far more than headquarters had promised. These weren't military vessels. They were patrol ships, customs cutters, even armed merchant vessels. Every human ship within 6 systems had abandoned their posts and raced to help. The Krathon warships, suddenly facing overwhelming numbers, hesitated. Thornak's voice came across all channels, confusion evident. "This makes no sense. You risk your entire frontier defense for one insignificant world? For a species not even your own?" Captain Rodriguez answered, her voice carrying to every ship present. "You wouldn't understand, Thornak. Where we come from, when someone calls for help, you answer. When someone fights for what's right, you stand beside them. That's what makes us human.